Okay, welcome to the second edition of the Data Value Show, and I'm honoured to have Matt Housley, who's been back to back. He's just been on his morning data chat with Joe, so he's just going to come straight across now. I'm going to add him to the stream.
How's it going, Chris? Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed, Matt. Good to speak to you again.
Fantastic. Okay, it's great to be here. It's an honor to be the second guest on the show.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this is actually a more favourite topic than the show I did last time. So this is like the best one to
Yeah,
date.
yeah.
Thanks for joining, Matt, and thank you everyone for joining the show as well. And seeing it's called the Data Value Show, we thought what better to discuss than what business value is or WTF. What's meant by business value, and a lot that we've been discussing this a lot recently, Matt. And I've got some points I think we're going to cover. So I think these things, I think it's aligned very much to the article that's due to go out soon that we've been working on, which will form one of the chapters of the book. I think it's first of all defining what we think business value is, what we think the business value channels are, and when we mean by business value, how that links to monetization. So, first of all, do a bit of an intro. Everyone must know who you are anyway, but if anyone that doesn't, give a bit of intro of your background, what we've been up to, and what you've been up to recently as well.
Yeah. So I actually come from academia originally, which is pretty far, I guess, in a practical sense from business value. Although I guess academia also has its own versions of values, like educational success with students and student outcomes and such things. So there is that kind of way of thinking of it. But eventually, I got into data science. And then when I got into data science, I ran into, interestingly enough, some business value questions. In other words, it's very easy in data science and in data in general to work on hobby projects and not actually deliver stuff. It's always a danger. And even if you deliver something, the question is, how useful is it to the business? And so over time, what I discovered is that a lot of the problems that I needed to solve to actually deliver value, to deliver things that were practical, came down to more data engineering. And that's not to say that data science, machine learning, and all the other exciting things going on right now are not important, but it's rather to say that they all require a lot of foundations to be successful. And so to actually deliver successful projects, you need to have a solid foundation of data engineering, data modeling, business objectives, like a lot of different things need to flow into it. Along those lines, Joe Reese and I wrote a book about data engineering specifically because we felt that one at that point didn't exist that represented sort of the modern state of the discipline. And so we wrote a book called Fundamentals of Data Engineering for O'Reilly, and it's done really well and generated a really good response from people. And so that's been an exciting spot to be in. And then you and I, Chris, have discussed writing a book. We're in the process of doing so. About essentially data performance is kind of what the working idea that we have right now. So not just monetization, but like how can data be used better within an organization? And so I think that's a lot of what we're here to talk about today, especially as we define things like business value.
Definitely. And I think it came, that high performance theme came from a post where there was some interesting comments a little while ago, which it fueled some of the thoughts and discussions that we'll cover today. And that was high performance data. So what makes data high performance? I think the conversation we had yesterday when we were talking about electricity, electricity is, if you think of electricity as the data, it's not actually, electricity doesn't add value until it's plugged into something. So that could be a data product. It could be one of the business value channels that we're defining as well. So the high performance data playbook is what we're trying to create.
Exactly.
And I think what you said earlier as well was about the undercurrents or the undercurrents of the foundational components. And I always think it was layers. And the engineering, what you've done with that book with Joe, it really showed you, okay, this is data engineering, this is what supports that. I think what we're trying to do is take it to the next level now. Okay, right, engineering is one of the undercurrents that supports achieving business value. I I think I'm going to throw out there what we think, well, that we coined as the definition of business value, and would love anyone's views on this. And I think business value we've defined as the evidenceable positive impact on your bottom line. And if it isn't a positive impact, it's R&D. You know, it was research that maybe might make some value at some stage, but it wasn't. It definitely wasn't an overhead. So I think that's one lens on it. I think the other lens is it's the machine that makes the machine. So you have a business value machine, aka the modern data stack. I think with the new LLMs, maybe we'll call it modern data stack 5.0. I'm not sure what version we're up to now, but you're giving it there. So so what's your view of when people ask you to describe what business value is, and how would you articulate that?
Okay, so business value, it's very tricky to define, right? But there's this famous U.S. Supreme Court case, and there's the famous line from one of the opinions, which is, you know it when you see it. And I think we can say something similar about business value. I think as we write out the book, we'll get more precise about it. But so to your point, Chris, there's the bottom line aspect, but there's also like all the stuff that indirectly affects the bottom line. And often it turns out that working in data, it's the stuff that indirectly affects the bottom line that we really care about. Of course, there are things. So for example, if I'm working with Google Ads and I improve the quality of the data that allows me to serve ads more directly to potential customers, so to not serve ads to people who aren't interested in what I'm offering and serve ads to people who are interested, that's very direct, right? I can even, we talked a lot yesterday about attribution in our own conversations in our working session. You can even in that situation often attribute very effectively. You could say, okay, by improving the data in this way, my efficiency of ad spend based on this attribution model that attributes sales to advertising spend, I've improved 20% efficiency or something like this. That's a very direct, like business value bottom line. But a lot of examples that come up are indirect. So for example, better quality reporting that supports better decisions. I absolutely think that's business value, but it's harder to like attach a dollar sign to that, an exact number especially. And we talked about a lot about that yesterday and things like indirect evidencing and saying, okay, we've talked to these decision makers. They feel like, and there is, this kind of unscientific aspect of like thoughts and feelings that we have to go through in business, because that's kind of how business works sometimes. But they believe they're getting better insights and making better decisions based on the better quality data that we're providing them. Maybe you even ask them in some ways for an estimate of how much that impacts their decision making. Another example I like to use that's indirect but very, very important is quality of customer service. And in the accounting world, there actually is a direct number that you attach to this sometimes. There's like a goodwill number that will even be put into official reporting for public companies to say we believe the goodwill of our company, of our customers toward our company, and even people who are not customers might be worth this much money. You can see what happens when you start to lose goodwill. So for example, a lot of businesses are struggling post-COVID with various processes, and like airlines are struggling a lot with canceled flights and such. And you can see the anger rising as stuff like this happens. So goodwill going down, it's hard to get the exact number for how that's going to impact your business bottom line, but it's pretty clear that if you upset customers, they're going to book fewer flights with you. Or for example, if I'm a car manufacturer and I have quality problems, there's the direct bottom line impact of things like recalls and warranty repairs, but there's also the indirect bottom line impact of customers like my product less. So people who bought it get upset that my car breaks down randomly because of problems, and people who didn't buy the car read reviews of the car and then are less likely to buy a car from that company in the future. And so all of those things can be business value. Being data people, we like the value to be very, very concrete, but sometimes you do have to think a bit obliquely about how data can impact the bottom line. So again, going back to the car manufacturer example, if I can improve the quality of data about parts coming into my factories, and I can track down bad parts before they end up in my car, then that improves quality, which will improve the customer experience. It will improve customer reviews. It will ideally improve quality metrics from places like J.D. Powers. and consumer reports, and then down the line, I'll see better sales, better customer reputation coming out of that as a consequence.
And I think there's the things you mentioned there. Some things are very easy to evidence. Some things aren't very easy to evidence. Is the key categories. And I think something we talk about in this article or this post that we're going to be doing is if you take the scenario of going to a court of law. So okay, I'm going to go to stand up in front of a judge. And ideally, you're going to win the case. You need the smoking gun. I prove it. The forensic. There's no doubt in it. Video evidence, whatever it is, it's undisputed evidence, and it's going to be a slam dunk case. So, if you're able to find that when you're defining business value, and I've seen it on many occasions where the marketing department will say, "I'm going to give you 200 times ROI, return on investment, from this money you're going to spend on this Salesforce implementation." But the real is it's all marketing, which is very, very hard to actually to quantify that you have actually made that. And it's probably the same amount that 3 other projects are also saying they're saving as well, because they're all making the same claims. So that's having something that the smoking gun. Then the alternative, I think what you're going to there with some of those examples was you need enough circumstantial evidence. So it's enough data points that can evidence that based on historical trending, based on this viewpoint, based on the customer life cycle value, retention, this has been the effect of our approach. I think the other one that's very easy to do is the business process optimization. So the car parts you're talking about. So if you're able to, by the way, we always carry this much extra in stock. Our warehouse is being used now for the rack space is being used for things that aren't actually used very often at all. So we're wasting our space there, where it's much better for us to have the fastest moving parts, and that's very easy to evidence because you're showing that how you be more efficient with your space, with your stock. And the time it takes to deliver it, and you're not buying things you don't need. Stock's not sold is stock that is just sitting on your balance sheet as an asset, but it's only actually going to return that money when it's actually sold. So there's no point stocking things that you're never going to sell not going to sell very often.
Yeah, let me follow on this discussion, because I think this particular discussion about just-in-time inventory is really interesting, because there are actually many aspects to this. So you have the unsold stock that's sitting on the shelf, but you also have what's come up sometimes when companies have actually implemented this, is that they may not have stock when they need it to sell. And I think one thing that's kind of surfaces is the need to have KPIs and metrics that dig kind of into the details, right? Because if you, from an accounting perspective, just have on your books, okay, this is the amount of inventory that's sitting in my warehouses at any given time that's not been sold yet, therefore it's just kind of like money in a bank account that's not doing anything. It's actually depreciating over time. The value goes down because maybe if I'm selling tires, they're only good for so long. After a year, maybe you can't sell them or something like this. But then you also need metrics that say, okay, but how often are my customers not able to get the tires they need right away? So say a customer has a nail in a tire, they come in, tire they need is not available, they go to someone else, right? And so you need to make sure that as you define these KPIs, you have KPIs that kind of get down into the details enough that you're seeing everything that's going on with your business, which is frankly a very tricky problem. I mean, it's all comes down to cognitive load and our ability to process things, and the ability of executives and engineers to look at reports and see what's going on in very fine detail.
Yeah, I think that the KPIs is an interesting one, and there's a question from Mike that I'll go back to in a minute, which this will probably help with answering as well. And it was a discussion I had with I got Ron Itterman a little while ago about the KPI of KPIs, and we've suffered from information overload. We have all of these metrics that are made available to us, and you mentioned our cognitive, our brain power, what we can actually process, and are we actually focusing on the right things? And if you haven't actually got those KPIs that are underpinning your business strategy, what you need to achieve, and you have them being created and they're there, and you look at what is their purpose. if they're not linked to anything, they're actually an overhead of creation, overhead of your time looking at it. I like to use the thing is time's the most precious asset I have now. I can't create any more of it. And there's not enough time, not enough hours a day to do everything. So where I need to look where I can add value myself the most. So I think that understanding your business, actually going, okay, these are the KPIs that I know are underpinning it. These are the dials that I need to focus on. I think the comparison I give is maybe a pilot. He might have in his cockpit, 200 different dials, all the rest of it. But if he knows which ones he needs to be keeping an eye on. Just keep an eye on 3 of them. He's looking at probably wind speed, altitude and fuel. I know the 3. If any of them go wrong, he'll be going to look somewhere else. And it's having that hierarchy of KPIs that will navigate you through where you need to see those things. And then you can look to optimize areas where you've identified potential savings, which links onto the whole KPIs. But let me put Mike's question up.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I've actually worked out how to do this. I'm new into this. I'm normally a guest, not a host, so I'm trying to work out how to actually get these things done. So yeah, nice to catch up, Mike. We've been speaking to Mike for many years. We're ready to chat. So thanks for tuning in. So yeah, the question there is business values and imperatives. Yeah, I think we're all agreeing there, and this is I think why we think we need to focus on the covering of this book to help achieve that. So it is lost in the sea of process. I think I agree. So what's the best advice to realign focus on business value throughput?
Yeah, the sea of process one is tricky. I mean, you do want efficient processes, right? Like manufacturing, you want to make sure that the parts are high quality, that the manufacturing process is efficient, that there isn't waste as things go through. But to Mike's point here, if the process becomes at some point a lot more important than people, I think that's where we sometimes start to lose sight of business value as well. So for example, often you'll find inside of an organization, the humans you talk to know what's going on. They have a pretty good sense. So I found this over and over again when I was working in data science. You could look at the data all day long and think you knew what was going on, but then you go talk to the domain expert and they would explain to you a lot more about what the data meant. And they would tell you, oh, well, this type of event isn't getting logged correctly. They actually knew a lot of data quality issues just by being the domain expert in a certain area of the company. And they'll tell you, yeah, this particular type of sale isn't getting logged correctly. Or, oh, you're looking at this number, but you actually need to deduct 5% because that's how much we take off as estimated fraud. And you would get those kinds of details. And I think one of the really important things as we're using data is to keep those human conversations going so we can surface opportunities. A lot of business value comes down to identifying opportunities that we haven't seen before, and ideally our competitors haven't seen either, right? And saying there's an opportunity for us to do this, this, and this better. If we have the right data, if we have the right processes, it actually won't cost the company much money. But our customers will be a lot happier because, first of all, in the data, we see this particular type of customer complaint showing up all the time in surveys. And by the way, I can tell you personally that that's true too, just from my conversations with customers, that they're really unhappy about these 3 things. And so if we can fix some of these using data, that's going to uncover a lot of business value.
Yeah. I think I'll pick up, how we realign the focus. I think it's linked to your business process thing we talk about, or the processes. I think too many companies don't have their business processes defined. And you say it's in people's heads of what actually happens.
That's a good point, yeah.
And I think even the ones that are defined, they're normally a static activity. So the only time I've seen them is when you've had large digital transformations or a merger or something. They have to do this because there's no way of joining all the systems together. But you normally find they'll erode over that. It'll be a one-off. So yeah, I think that's something that I think that needs to help to help that business value, because there's no way of evidencing it. And this is the thing go back to earlier is, business values, it needs to be evidenceable, and otherwise it's a PowerPoint presentation that's saying what you could achieve, which is what you could have won. And it's not saying that you're actually evidencing you are going to ever get it. So to be able to have a business process that then you can evidence said changes, you're going to stand a chance of actually getting the budget and then getting approval for the next piece. And I think the other thing we're trying to address in this, or trying to address in this book, is what are the business value channels? And I think if people are able to understand, okay, when you say which business value are you on about? Are you on about aggregated data? Are you on about business process optimization? Are you on about marketing? Are you on about which bit? Oh, I'm on about this. Okay, right. Let's look at this particular channel. And MIT have got a white paper that we looked at and discussed as well, which is we're talking about wrap, sell, improve. And anything you're doing, to use that term, monetize, we're consciously not trying to use the word data monetization, because everyone just thinks you're just selling raw data, and it's not that. I think monetization, go back to that business value, is the positive impact on your bottom line. To actually prove it came from data, you need to add that word evidenceable. And then if then you say, okay, right, we have a number of channels. One of them could be selling the aggregated or raw data. One could be selling aggregated data. One could be selling insight. That's right. And one could be just using the information back for understanding your business processes. So I think that's the first thing that's needed out there, is there to be a common understanding when we're talking about business value, which channel you're referring to. And the other thing we're working on is, all right, now you've got those channels defined, what are the underlying foundational pieces, undercurrents, which we say as well, that allow you to achieve that? And in what order and what maturity you need them? And I think this is where that playbook aspect comes into it. Because someone coming in and saying, right, okay, right, what are we going to do? We're going to do monetization. Well, okay, what sort of monetization? Business value. Okay, what sort of business value? This channel. Okay, right. So what technology, what maturity would you need to be to actually use that monetization or get that data monetization? And I think if you use that as a catalyst of the discussion point to go and get that, the rest of it becomes a bit of a snowball effect, because as soon as you've got that quick win, and something we're going to talk about, I've got a shout out to Scott Taylor. I think he's on the show next month, and I think he's all about how you sell your data product or project. I think that's, I won't go too much into that today, but I think your team needs to be seen as sellers of business value, and they need to be able to be out there banging the drum about this is how we've either helped other people, this is what we can do. They should be a sales team as well internally. So yeah, I hope that answered that one, Mike. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I want to roll back here too. So Steve McDonald, this goes back to earlier when we were talking about things like customer satisfaction or customer unhappiness.
Yeah.
And Steve McDonald just posted on here NPS, which is short for Net Promoter Score. And I think he's right.
Told me that, because I didn't know. I was going to message you.
Okay.
And say, I was going to know what are you on about?
Yeah. So Net Promoter Score. It's the idea. It's been a while since I've looked at this, but it's the idea that you can do.
It's Steve's telephone number as well. He seems to have it in his LinkedIn profile. Sorry for GDPR infringement there, but it was
okay. But yeah, it's this idea that you can. I think roughly speaking, the idea is that you maybe if you have a 1 to 10 scale on customer satisfaction. Say you survey your customers and you ask them, "Hey, so how satisfied are you with this company right now that you're doing business with?" And they can answer from 1 to 10. And your if I recall correctly, your promoters are like your 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s typically. And then you look at who your detractors are, and those would be like your fairly low scores. And then you want to take, okay, what percentage are my promoters minus what percentage are my detractors, I think, and that's how you're going to get your Net Promoter Score. But the idea, again, is roughly, I might be getting some of those details wrong, but the idea is to analyze customer surveys to try to see how happy your customers are. And so the idea is that a lot of these initiatives that ideally will improve customer satisfaction should be evidenceable through that kind of data. And you can do things like, for airlines, if a customer's flight gets canceled, how does that affect their NPS? If I take the cluster of all customers who had canceled flights, and maybe I can even do things like analyze flight delays, 1 hour or less, more than 1 hour, and see how that affects NPS. And that allows you to evidence the value of doing things like improving on-time performance for an airline, or again, going back to the car discussion, analyze the Net Promoter Score of people who had their cars break down or had repairs in warranty or had repairs out of warranty, and see how those scores vary based on the experience they have. And then that's one side of data, right? So doing that analysis with data to get a clearer picture of your customer experience. And then also on the other side, you can use data to improve internal processes that do things like reduce warranty repairs, reduce out of warranty repairs, reduce delayed flights, these kinds of things.
That's a really, in fact, I've actually learned some stuff as well. So I didn't know where MPS was, but I think actually comparing the two different demographics. So, okay, these are people, these are happy clients, these are our unhappy clients.
Yeah.
What's the delta between them on these things? So the cost of us preventing that, and if you're able to understand, your clients are sometimes your best salespeople. If they're saying they had a great they've had a great experience, that spreads. So there must be like some sort of bad news spread factor. Like, okay, if we have this many bad people or many comments about it, how many good comments need to be weighed to weigh them out? So yeah, it's an interesting viewpoint, and so probably something we'll have to add now as well. So
yeah, certainly.
And your beer, Steve.
The important thing about NPS is that it's the classic statistics problem. If you just give the mean, the typical average, it doesn't. There's a lot of data that gets lost if you just take the mean of a number. So if I just take the mean of customer feedback scores and say that it's 6, that doesn't really tell me my distribution of customers. Like what fraction are happy customers, 7 to 10s, what fraction are really unhappy, your detractors, and what fraction are just kind of neutral, meh, about the company. And then how do those different parts of that distribution behave? Yeah, because absolutely. I mean, we often lose sight of this in data professions, I feel like, but customers are some of your best salespeople, right? So it's great to use targeted ads. It's great to use technology, but like it's actually people who do a lot of your sales for you externally if you treat them well. And that is something you can to some extent measure with data.
Yeah, I think there's another one, which is a lot of good comments coming in here, but I want to say NPS is never bias, and I think the reason why sometimes mean is not good because that's why the mean data streets are mean. So it's not always it's knowing what statistics to use, because otherwise they can give you biases or not actually show you where the real problem is. So know your stats. That's what I'm hanging around with you, mate. You're book smart. I'm just street smart. So.
Well, I'm trying to make Booksmart useful. It's not always easy. So
yeah, well, I think this is where the two worlds meeting are hopefully going to add more business value. So there goes another use of business value. Just reading the book.
Well, to your point, Chris, working in this discipline, I feel like a lot of data people, especially who came from academia and then like moved into data science or something, get very obsessed with statistics and like the scientific method, and that's all great, but they then need to, I learned this over time, really need to talk to the business people who just have experience with customers and experience with just what happens day to day in a business. Either one alone, if you're just on the business side and you're not using data and statistics, then you actually don't have a very clear view of what's going on. You've heard a lot of great customer experience stories. That aspect you understand, but you might be pretty blind to certain things because you're not looking at statistics and you're not looking at the mathematical details. On the other hand, if you're just abstractly looking at the statistics, you may never even understand how your business works, the business processes, without talking to the people who run the business, who make things work day to day and actually talk to customers and work with them.
Yeah, I touched on a few points that think of that. It's how business data teams and application team or IT work better together, and they do work better together. And I think the other one is the route to live. So we talk about I've seen it when you get data scientists in academia, and they come up with some really great stuff, and it's really insightful, and I'm blown away with some of the things I see. But it never gets into production, so it causes a bit of frustration. So they don't understand what we do, we're not allowed to go and do it. So having that glue that brings it all together, actually, and I think this is where the business value can become that glue as well. So your data scientist, he knows why he's doing it, and also he sees it, actually the benefits of his effort and work that he does. So he sees it go to live. there's nothing more frustrating, and I know from experience, is having some great work that's just sat in development that just gets blocked by other things, or it gets deprioritized. It's demotivating, and it's not adding the value because your teams all worked on it. They've created their hypotheses of what this thing can achieve. And they're pretty sure it will. They keep seeing other things take priority, which doesn't add as much business value. And if from that company strategy, business vision, you've got your roadmap. Maybe by then we would have the book completed. You'll have your playbook of what you need to do in the right order. You can really start getting the best out of your teams to achieve and unlock the value. I think our strapline at the moment is look to the past to innovate for the future, and I think it's it's such a good time because it's LLM, large language models, generative AI, all that stuff is not going to work until you get everything else understood. Understand your business process, understanding the quality of data, having all the foundations in places, understanding how you're going to be better than your competition. Then off that, you can start to look at some of the cool, funky stuff that's coming out now. But no one's quite prepared for it still. I think everyone's maybe the markets move very quickly. I think the modern data stacks evolve so quick, and I don't think there's been a nice path to help companies easily navigate it. So.
Yeah, and let's tie some of these themes together about the modern data stack, and then going back a little further, like the whole big data movement that happened before these like cloud data warehouses came out and made things even easier. There was quite often a focus on just technology, right? Like big data, Hadoop, it's so cool. Let's deploy it within our organization. Let's build a data lake, and the miraculous things will happen. And in many cases, that wasn't really tied to real concrete use cases. Like, well, what do we actually intend to do with this technology that's going to help our business? What are we explicitly trying to do? And I think in general, the next stage, the modern data stack, where similar technology became available but much, much easier. And now you could do with Snowflake a lot of the things that you used to have to do with Hadoop. And it's very turnkey. You just go create an account, and then you can start running SQL queries on massive amounts of data. The positive aspect of the modern data stack was that it made analytics much, much more accessible, right? So teams that just did not have the resources to run analytics, to run Hadoop, or alternatively to run really complex on-prem systems like Teradata could now do so. The negative side, that a lot of the critiques of the modern data stack come down to the fact that in some cases people would deploy this new generation of technology and even do a lot of reporting without tying that reporting to actual business processes, right? Like, what are we actually going to do with this data? How is this going to affect decision making? How is it going to improve processes? How is it going to improve like inventory management that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, and this links quite nicely onto this comment here from Alex, actually. So yeah, it's the forgotten art of good business case and force down the road cycles, investment cycles, and agile. So there's something we touched on as well is this OPEX versus CAPEX. And right at the beginning of this discussions about this high performance thing, and it always bothered me that I saw data projects as second citizens sometimes for other projects. As and the requirements came late, or it wasn't really woolly. It was just go deal with the data afterwards, and it wasn't even part of the main project launch. So it was always a downstream piece, and we got bad press, I think, as a lot of data projects were failures, especially during that Hadoop era. So it was a money pit for many companies, and and the whole OPEX scenario of, okay, right, don't worry, I can just dial it up. If it doesn't perform very well, just stick some more compute in, put a larger warehouse. Data modeling got forgotten, so and it became a little bit yeehaw, which again created lots of bad quality data and duplication data. So yeah, I think so. To Alex's point, yeah, I think that's one of the things again that I think needs to be addressed, and I think we'll be tackling that when we talk about the funding life cycle for your data projects. And if rather than, okay, we know the days of waterfall investments, okay, we're not going to go back there, but we don't want to be in this route of a very fast-paced, agile, where it's just all coming out of an OPEX budget, and no one actually knows what it's being used for.
Yes.
And it becomes when people cut back, they go and try and cut OPEX, and then you end up cutting your teams that probably actually could be deployed to add more business value. So you're really not using your company assets, being your people as well, in the right way. So I believe that if we start doing this approach of doing that incremental roadmap, that each piece is, I suppose it's like a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? You've got it's another piece of the puzzle, and the more complete it gets, the more complete the vision, but the more of the vision it completes. But each piece is adding to something that's going to release more value at a later date. So, yeah, I'd like the data teams to start getting, even if it's not on the ledger of a books or something like that. If we're not, we're looking at Doug Laney's book on Infonomics, and I don't think we're not going to be able to change the accountancy rules very quickly. Probably not in my lifespan, but maybe achieve it towards the end. But if you're able to change the mindset of people again, I know these guys added that value. All it is, it's convincing the CFO to sign off. Whether it's OPEX, CAPEX, I don't care as much. It's actually him saying, yeah, that's the right thing for us to do. Here's the money for it. Every time your project comes up, as long as you've got that nice roadmap, each one of those little projects is taking you on that path to that ultimate vision you may have of having your own internal generative AI capability, which is what everyone's probably striving to get to now.
Well, and I mean, ideally, you have the roadmap and you can point to successes, right, Chris? And the successes may not be concrete bottom line, right? You may not be able to attach a dollar value to the successes, but you might be able to say, look, these customers who are really unhappy before, they're a little bit happier now, right? Yep. So the example I use all the time, so sorry if I'm annoying people by using the same example over and over again, but the example I use is that when I was actually coming to Switzerland for a conference that you hosted, the Skiers and Data Conference, my bag got lost. I had to check a bag because I had some cameras and things that I had to carry on the plane. And then when I came back, my bag got lost again. And I don't know that this was even really the airline's fault, because there were like strikes going on in Paris. There was all kinds of stuff happening. But the fact that I couldn't get information about my bag and where it was made me very unhappy. And so having a data project that like gave me information automatically about what happened to my bag before I have to ask about it, before I go to the baggage claim and says, hey, your bag is not lost, we just haven't gotten it to you yet. It got delayed because it couldn't get through customs because there were strikes, but we have it, here it is. That would be very helpful, right? It doesn't completely solve my problem, but at least gives me some satisfaction of knowing what's going on. If in my roadmap, I can point to small successes like that and say, our customers now have a clearer picture of what's happening with their luggage. Here are some NPS scores that indicate it appears that this has improved customer satisfaction with our airline product, even though there are these other external factors going on that we can't control. Then when I give the CFO and the CEO a roadmap, yep, I can also say, here are my successes. This is some stuff that I want to do in the future on top of what we've already done. And by the way, here 5 of them are going to be customer satisfaction initiatives. 6 of them are going to be quality improvements. Maybe these others are just direct bottom line improvements for advertising spend or something.
Okay, so Mark's been putting some comments on here. Looks like Merit must have upset him at some stage because they lost it. So there you go, Merit. So look, the business, if you'd looked after Mark, you'd have made much more. And which airline would you like to? Would you want to name and shame, or have they?
I'm not going to. You're
not like that's not morals, everyone.
It's several airlines actually, because it was international, and so it was code sharing and all this stuff that we were dealing with. But yeah,
I'm going to say that BA let me down on the way to Vegas, though, so I'm going to name them. I don't have the same morals as you, Matt.
Yeah. Well, so one interesting thing about airlines specifically is that they rely heavily on a customer lifetime value model. So in other words, if you look at frequent flyer programs, how do you value those benefits? So on the one hand, it's like, okay, you're just giving this frequent flyer that has like medallion status, diamond status, whatever. they get upgraded to a first class seat. On the one hand, they get upgraded because that's an unsold first class seat.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I treat it as a zero value item. Or alternatively, I can look at, okay, what if I sold that seat a bit cheaper and I made, $2,000 rather than $3,000 that I was originally going to charge? Those benefits are actually very, very valuable potentially if you look at them from the right accounting perspective. So why is it that airlines are willing to give away so much with these frequent flyer programs? And it's because they're relying on this customer lifetime value view, where it's like, okay, today I'm giving a customer this like $3,000 seat, but I know because they're a frequent flyer, they might be spending $10,000 a year for the next 5 years, 10 years, and it's all going to add up over time. If that's your model, if that's how you want to approach customers, then you really should be thinking about these issues of customer satisfaction and how you can use data to improve customer satisfaction. To Mark's point here, like they lost $200,000 of business because you can easily lose the business of one frequent flyer by not providing them good customer service and good information. Or even worse, if you make an executive upset or someone on your team talks to an executive about a bad experience, an entire airline contract can get pulled and sent to a competitor. And so these are the kinds of things that we want to try to do with data when we think about business values, improve those experiences so the customers will be more loyal to the business and bring in more business either directly for themselves or through their companies.
So interesting point about the upgrade, because I don't get upgraded very often. I'm just pointing out as well, just to, while I can moan. But it's so for example, if I was a frequent business class or first class user, and I'd say, okay, but I keep seeing the other people get upgraded. Well, I'm not going to bother now. So I'm just going to go for the low one down and hope I get upgraded. So it's how I suppose it's if you're giving it away too easily, it could actually erode the value as well.
Right. It's finding that right. There's a whole like art and science of how they price airline seats to determine who should pay cash versus how often. They do want people to get upgraded once in a while because that's what makes those programs valuable, but they don't want to make it certain, right? They don't want it to be like every time I fly, I get upgraded, therefore I never pay for that first class seat. But they also want it to happen often enough that it's like, hey, I'm going to keep flying with this airline because I have these benefits that show up often enough for it to be worthwhile.
Yeah. You triggered another, and it's something we discussed before as well. And I called it the value erosion time. So data can add more business value depending on when it gets you. And there's just the whole move towards streaming and real time replication. Sometimes it has a cost overhead to perform that. If you're having to process things more often rather than batch, but it may give you more value. And I think the example I used, it was on a post, I called them brain farts, one of the things I was thinking out one of the nights was, if I need to give accounts payable a list of the people that haven't paid, aged debtors, and I know that they're only working, they do it once a month, or they do it once a week, or what, and it's not that often, it's not every day or every minute it needs to be up to date. It needs to be up to date at the beginning of the day at least, or the end of each day, but maybe no more frequent than that. But you might be running, you send that as a stream. It's probably not a good use case for you to have that. Maybe in some organisations, maybe that payment within the day could be an issue, but in most cases, it probably isn't the most important thing to be real time. But the other scenario could be, and you wouldn't think it would be maybe in a standard one, is stock controller. You need to order stock to replenish the latest fashion craze that's out there at the moment. So I don't know, some skinny jeans or something cool like that, or was cool. I don't know. I'm no fashion expert now. So there's a high demand for these, and there's discounts being offered if they do a bulk order, but it has to be in by this date for them to go and get the saving on the shipping, the additional volume discount, and making sure you got enough to sell because they're flying off like they're going very fast off the shelves. So, but your forecast team, or the ones doing the data science, they're doing scraping off the web to do this. They're doing some stuff. They're going, right, actually, we're still on the up curve. We still need to be ordering higher. It's not plateauing. Based on this month, we predict it's going to increase by this amount. they don't get that figure on time, and they needed it by the 5 p.m. deadline. They get it if they get it at the end of the week. Data scientists have some great, some great work for creating this whole, analysis. But great, it's Friday now. I need that by Monday. I can't do the volume discount. I try to go back to order. It's all out of stock now. We're going to miss out on this many sales, and also the discount on what I did buy as well. So, yeah, I think understanding. Back down to that business thing. Yeah, understanding how your business works. So your data scientist may not understand the consequence of or the gravitas of that particular analysis and how it to be performed. In that case, well, maybe he was trying to save money running it on a Snowflake extra small. And in that case, it probably would have been worth him. He'd run it on a 6XL. So, get extremes there. So, but it all goes back down to understanding why we're doing something in an organization, what the associated value is of it, and being able to evidence it as well.
Yeah, and that's where I think when we were brainstorming, we came up with this idea of high performance data. In fact, you talked about this. It was probably 2 years ago on a show with Joe and I, and some people push back. They're like, no, high performance means high performance database. And I think where we disagree with that is that you can have, the biggest Snowflake cluster in the world, and if it doesn't deliver the data you need on time, it's pretty low performance, right? Or on the other hand, I see a lot of people obsessing in the real-time world over like how real-time is your system. Is it like sub-second, delivering real-time analytics? And in many cases, this is just a lot of navel-gazing that's not useful. What's important is that it delivers what your business needs. And in many cases, if customers can see business metrics show up within a couple minutes, they're going to be very, very happy. On the other hand, when I'm waiting for an Uber, it's often very useful for me to have like pretty real-time analytics so I know where a car is, or if I'm doing high-speed stock trading, and then they care about milliseconds, right? So it's all about high-performance data is not about having the fastest system available. It's about having a system that meets the business requirements that are useful, that delivers data in a timely manner, to your point, Chris, so that I can actually make good business decisions and save the company money, make customers happy, these kinds of things that are core to business value.
Totally agree. We've got another thing from Mike here, comment. So, working out business, do you recommend working out the value of data first? So I don't think you can, because we talked about this before. It's trying to work out the value of your electricity you've got. If it's sitting in a transformer, it has no value. You can count it. It's not adding value. It's not until it's linked to a business process or linked to multiple business processes. Then after that, you can actually see what the value is of that. So, say, for example, some demographic analysis or customer lifecycle value for your client. All of the sources that are needed for that, it's not until you've got that calculation that then it can start providing value. And if that then value is provided across 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 products, the value of it goes up even more. So you do need to know what data's out there, and I think that's more of a cataloging that's out there, and maybe need to do the scoring of the quality of it.
Yes.
So those things I think you need to, but I don't think you can actually attribute any value to the raw data. Maybe you can put some value to derived metrics that have come from it. I think it's a tough one.
Yeah, and I think in many cases, there's this old term, data mining. I think most people probably it's kind of, it feels stodgy now, right? It feels like out of date, but I kind of like the term in certain respects, because the idea of mining is to look for value that you hadn't previously identified. And so you have this data sitting there. What can you do with it that you hadn't thought of in the past? How can you use it to improve your product, basically, in various ways? And so that's where data engineering plus product becomes this creative process, and data science, to say, hey, we have this data. What could we use it for in a business process? What new products, what new ideas could come out of this data if we were just a little more creative? And then there's another aspect too, which is often you identify data that would be useful that you aren't collecting yet. So, using what you have, and then identifying data that you should start collecting because it might be useful for a new product or project in the future.
Really good point on that, and that's remember, you can't evidence anything until you've actually got some metrics to measure against. So if you haven't got that business process, even if you haven't optimized it yet, as long as you got it, if you haven't got it defined and actually understanding what's happening at each of those points, you're not able to go and do any optimization for it later. So having the foresight to understand what things are useful to capture and actually capture them ahead of actually needing them, because the day you need them, you can't go read. Sometimes that data's gone. If you're screen scraping it, or if you're not tracking history and things, or you're not doing point in time storage, it's you're not going to go back. So having that insight, but just first of all understanding your business process, and then say, all right, what data would be useful at each one of these parts of the business process? Right, is it available? Can I capture it? Yes, you can. Right, use it to start optimizing what you do.
When I talk about new data collection, I'm also talking about timeliness, to your point, Chris. One thing I'll often tell clients is, like, almost every business of a reasonable size has a use case somewhere where real-time data would be really, really useful, or would help the customer experience, or maybe help with manufacturing processes, help with product delivery, whatever it is. You may already be collecting this data, but if it's not real time, it may not actually be that useful because it's not timely. And so again, that's like creative process, how to identify those opportunities that could really provide businesses with a big boost. And I think especially now in an environment of economic uncertainty, one of the ways you become a better competitor is not just through efficiency, but identifying new opportunities that other people haven't seen so far.
Yeah, I think, so we touched on it earlier, and I'm going to put Mark's we've got a comment there we'll go back to as well. And it was that the wrap, sell, improve. So I think the two that we are very clear are selling data, improving its business process optimization. I think the last one, which was a new sort of lens for me, even though I would have put it maybe in a data product category, but it's wrap. So wrapping something around, or using data to wrap a product or a service around something that all your customers are already using, and that can add value in a couple of ways, really. It could be a new feature that you add, and it's a paid for extra. It could be I refer to it as the stickiness factor. And sticky has not always the best term to use for that, but loyalty factor. I preferred using loyalty rather than sticky. So I think the analogy I used on this was, it's like going to a holiday resort and not wanting to leave at the end of it, and rebooking. So, and that's loyalty. You could be taken to the nicest prison in the world, but if you're not allowed to leave, and you may like it. Maybe you've got what's it called, Stockholm syndrome. You might like your kidnappers.
Well, then you become a promoter, right? Your NPS score goes up if you have less of Stockholm syndrome going on.
So that may so you want whatever when you're wrapping something, it needs to either do one of those two things. And I think that was a new category that was looking at maybe the business value channels. What characteristics that they have? And I don't think it's a one-to-one mapping. I think it's a one-to-many mapping. So a business value channel could be a bit of a wrap. It could be a wrapping a service. It could be a bit of selling the data as well. It could be a combination. But yeah, to Mark's point here, but process required to derive value. I think this triggered a thought of the machine that makes the machine. So we need a process which is your roadmap for your data team. That is your process for you to create your machine that can create the business value channels. So if you're able to create incremental projects that add more pieces to the puzzle, like Minecraft, adding little bits to it, before you know it, you've got a whole castle. When you've got a castle, you can add a moat to it or a data lake.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Alex was saying about waterfall versus agile. And I think fundamentally he's right. What I've seen happen with agile in many cases is that there's no vision. And so in other words, I worked with one company where executives kind of had free access to the front end developers, and they would constantly swoop in and ask for different features on a website. Like, oh, let's add this feature. Let's add this feature. And pretty soon what you had was just a jumble of features that kind of stepped on each other on this website versus having a larger vision of how things should be. And so I think to his point about business writing, you've got to have a larger vision. That's the sort of waterfall part, is just to develop the big ideas of like, what are we after? At the end of the day, what would we like our product to look like 1 year from now, 2 years from now? The agile part is to break that into smaller pieces, into smaller roadmap pieces, to your point, Chris, and say, okay, if we're an airline and our vision in the long term is like extreme customer loyalty, customer lifetime value, customers who want to keep coming back to us, what are the small pieces that contribute to that customer experience? And how can we add those over time in a smaller roadmap? I feel like in some ways, and I think this is what he's alluding to, we've gotten so obsessed with agile that we've sometimes lost sight of the bigger vision that needs to be there in order for agile to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, I think you just hit the nail on the head with that one there, like that. It's a feature factory. Yeah. So your machine that makes a machine, you're creating more features. Each of those features provides you the ability to execute on another business value channel. That business value channel releases more requirements, but which is linked to an easy to evidence value or easier to evidence value, and then you just keep adding more features until you have the best data platform in the world. That's the idea, I suppose.
Yeah, with a vision around it, right? Like you have a pretty clear idea of what that data platform does in your business versus, again, what sometimes happened in the Hadoop era where people would build a huge data lake, they'd collect all the business's data, and they had no idea what to do with it when they did.
Yeah. And I think this is where there is sometimes a bit of a balancing act to think of. IT have had the tendency to run ahead and go and think, I know what the business needs and go and build everything. I think some of those things they can, as soon as you start touching the data, you start doing data modeling, you can't do it without including the business. There are some standard sort of capabilities that are probably the foundational, like the data, having some data ops principles, having some data principles itself, having that strategy piece up front. So that, not a full data, full capability, what you think is needed, and then after that, you use the business to help you define what's the right order for those things. But understanding what your end game is from a technology capability, but only go and do that when you know there's a business justification for it. Yeah. There you go. So another man from you. There you go. Cool. Vision and strategy need to drive the business.
So that's a theme that, I mean, we're still developing the ideas in the book. So that's a theme that obviously needs to be there, is like the larger vision that drives the bus and drives technology. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're nearly at the hour, and I know you had an hour straight before this. I'm sure you'll be back to back. I'm sure you're looking for. But I mean, and if you want to let anyone know what you're up to, where you're next, or what some of your movements, if they want to catch up, where can they find you, Matt?
Things are a bit quiet right now. I'm not going to be traveling a lot again until probably September. And so in the meantime, I'll mostly be around New York City. So if you're in the area, say hi. And of course, Chris will be doing lots more writing sessions like we did yesterday.
We will. We need to up the game a little bit, but it's been great. Thanks to everyone for their comments. It's been very, very useful. I'm just going to add to the stream so we can just see that. So next week we've already got something scheduled, which is where data meets blockchain. I'll be honest, I'm going to be learning a little bit on this one myself. I'm going to be doing a bit of swatting up, but Lloyd Moore, CTO Valence, will be joining us. I think, that same week, is the same week of Ethan's meetup. I think it's on the 14th, I believe, 14th of July. So anyone in New York, I think you'll find me and Matt there.
That's the plan. Yeah.
You'll find me in New York. Wednesdays I'm normally about as well, and then Fridays is our working session. So you'll probably find both of us in on the Friday if you want to meet up in Manhattan over the next good few weeks at least. Anyway.
Has another data-driven NYC been announced? Not that I'm aware of.
I haven't seen it yet. No, okay. But I highly recommend going to it. It's very different than the meetups that Ethan and we do. This one actually has people presenting, which are actually quite interesting. Yeah. We have if we had people presenting, it would be interesting. Our ones, but we don't. Ours are just a more of a community drink, catch up, have some pizza, and chat with other peers in the industry. So. So thank you everyone for attending today. Matt, I'll be speaking to you very soon, and really appreciate you coming on. And I say we know we've both got a bit of it's a hot topic for both of us at the moment. So I really enjoyed the chat, even though we'll chat again soon after this. But it's good having it recorded for once. We can go back and actually review what we said.
Yeah, this was really great, Chris. Thank you for the invitation, and thanks
right.
for everyone who attended today. It was a pleasure.
All right, brilliant. Well, okay, let me. Okay, till next week, everyone, and have a good week. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Take care.